to VolunteerMatch's second BPN of the year. It's from Jitterbug to Twitter, harnessing the power of multiple generations in employee volunteer programs with Sherri Petro. Sherri is the president of VPI Strategies and a founding partner of Workplace Evolution, and we are very excited to have her join us today. So just a reminder for those of you on the call, if you have a question, please type it into the question box on your right-hand panel on the GoToWebinar instruction panel. At the end of the presentation, we'll have about 15 minutes of Q&A in which you can enter questions specific to Sherri's talk, and we'll answer those. Let's do a little test now for all the audience members out there. If you can type in hello or I'm online into the question box, we'll just see that everyone is connected and, oh, good, I'm starting to see them come in. Great, great. Got one from a Sue and a Wes. Wonderful. Without further ado, before I get to an introduction to Sherri, we also have two VolunteerMatch clients on the call. Tess Marstaller is the VolunteerMatch coordinator at the George Washington University, and during the presentation, Sherri will discuss with her what's going on at GWU. And we also have Carla Lehn from the California State Library. She's a Library Development Services professional, and she will be speaking about the program that they have there, recruiting volunteers. And now, Sherri, I will hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Megan. So let's talk a little bit about how we harness the power of multiple generations in employee volunteer programs. Megan, you want to go ahead and move that slide to the next one?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm a strategist, and as a strategist, I always have to have objectives, so you know what you're going to be getting out of the time that you're spending with us today. The first thing I'm going to do is define the generational mix, because there's a few different definitions. We're going to discuss the motivations of the four generations and the implications on your efforts, and then share how you can engage across the generational divide at your organization to increase participation. So one of the things I hear out there is we have different motivations, we have different values, and we can talk about them, but how do we actually leverage that information to truly help ourselves? Next slide. So for the generation mix, Megan, can you move to the next slide?
Yes, we're on generation mix.
Okay, so here's several things that you need to know about what you're seeing. There's a bunch of qualifiers. First of all, sociologists cannot agree on the names, the periodicities, when they start and when they end. However, this is a data-driven presentation. One of my favorite data sources is Deloitte. And because they have the best stuff out there from my perspective, that's the reason I use these periodicities. Also, you might pick up a magazine or a book and find out that there's different names. For instance, traditionalists are often called silence. And when I first started doing these presentations, I called them silence. And then somebody pulled me aside and said, I don't feel so silent. Okay, I don't want to offend my audience. Do you feel traditional? So we call them traditionalists, born 1925 to 45, currently 65 to 85 years old. Then we've got baby boomers. No one talks about baby boomers as anything other than boomers, born 1946 to 64. I love the fact that this year, because it's 2010, they are also 46 to 64 years old, so easy for me to remember. The name baby boomers, by the way, was coined by Langston Hughes. Then we've got Generation X. I like to call them poor lost Generation X because they're supposedly named this because there was nothing new and exciting that was happening as you guys were growing up. And you know, in the last century before, when you couldn't sign your name and you signed it with an X, supposedly that's why. Although I have had people say, excuse me, Billy Idol had an album and a group of that name. He's the one who should be credited with it, but it was actually another Canadian who was credited. They're 30 to 45 years old. Then we've got Generation Y, also called Generation WHY, if you are one, or if you deal with them a lot. You know why, because they ask a lot of questions, which I'm tooting the horn for. We take a look at all the different things that we're using. It's a good thing to have somebody question us and ask, why are we doing this the way that we're doing it? we have not called the end of this generation, which is the reason why it says born 1981 to 1996 question mark. And in fact, it was just in this past year that one brave sociologist decided to put a stake in the ground and say that it's 15 years and that it was 1996, which of course started a lot of the sociologists going, wait a second, should that really be called already? For our purposes, I'm just saying 29 years and younger. Norman Ryder did a thesis in 1950s that said that we are bound together by the external events that we all experience, which means that this presentation, as I'm giving it, really makes sense in the United States, Canada, and ironically Australia. May not make sense in other areas because we are impacted by the external events. The other thing that you need to know is that if you're smack dab in the middle of the generation, you may have more of the attributes and things that I'm going to be talking about today might make a little bit more sense. If you're out towards the edges, you may say, I might have been born a baby boomer, but the more I hear about it, I've got a lot of Generation X tendencies. So it's not a science. Other things that you need to know. Because if you're dealing with a volunteer force or inside your organization, if you've got a lot of first-generation immigrants, because they are impacted by the events that were happening as they were growing up, it's possible that this information may not hold as true. Okay, so our first polling question, our first and only polling question, I would like to know how the generation mix has affected your efforts. I believe we have a poll to the side there. Tell me what...
All right, I'm launching the poll now.
Yay. So take a second, read those. Volunteers are not getting along well together. I'm having a tough time managing the multiple generations. Marketing messages for the EVP are not as effective across generations. There's a technology divide, and I'm not sure how to navigate it. Communication learning styles are different and causing problems.
Sherri, I'll give it a few more minutes, and then I'll close the poll, and I'll read you the results.
Great.
Okay, we'll close the poll.
Oh, excellent.
It looks like we had 56% said there's a technology divide, 44% communications or learning are different and that causes a problem, and 39% said the marketing message for their EVP.
Okay, wonderful. That helps me sharpen the point here on the information that I'm going to be providing today. Great. Thank you so much. Now, both Tess and Carla are on the line. And Tess, I understand that you essentially have I'm going to call it a mandate, although it's not really that, from Michelle Obama on the service challenge that's happening at your university. Can you tell us a little bit about how the Generation Mix has affected your efforts in that program?
Tess, are you on the line?
Uh-oh, did we lose Tess?
We might have. I'll have Tess, feel free to chime in, and possibly Sherri can keep moving.
Okay.
And Carla, as well, is also having trouble with the audio, so we'll go with your presentation.
Okay. So Carla also has the Get Involved powered by your library program at the California State Library System. Carla, do you have any comments on this?
Only that we're not seeing major issues at this point in the field, but we have started noticing the differences in the generations, and people are interested in what they can do, particularly related to technology.
Got it. So when we're talking about technology, does that mean that because the generations are using different communication vehicles, or they just subscribe to technology in a different way, that it's impacting your program?
Yes, it requires staff to be thinking about how to use the different technologies to reach the different generational volunteers.
Absolutely, because one of the things that we know is that each generation has a preferred communication vehicle. This is important inside your organizations and externally. For instance, when we're talking about traditionalists, they prefer more face-to-face and familiar communication channels. They like stability and security. Those are things that they know. With baby boomers, got to tell you, baby boomers a little ambivalent. Think of them as the idealists, the transformers. They like a lot of change, but not too much change. So they prefer phone conversation. They prefer traditional marketing channels, although they are moving more towards non-traditional marketing channels, and it's being pushed by the interaction that they want to have with Gen Ys, and specifically their children. When it comes to Gen X, very much more male-oriented, and of course, with Gen Ys, text-oriented. So knowing what we know about preferred communication vehicles, what type of implications does that have on how we're shooting messages out? Megan, you can shoot to the next slide.
Okay, and I think we may have Tess on the call. Tess, are you? Okay, possibly not. We'll keep going with your presentation, Sherri.
Okay.
So we're on the Generational Volunteering 2009 U.S. Labor Statistics slide.
Great. So this information is brand spanking new from the U.S. Labor Statistics. So here's a couple of things that you need to know. You know how I mentioned at the very beginning that there are different periodicities? Unfortunately, the Labor Council doesn't necessarily cut it up just like I do. For traditionalists, for the 65 plus, we have 24% are interested or participating, in generational volunteering. For baby boomers, that 20-year period is captured in the labor statistics at 30%. Now, when it comes for Gen X and Gen Y, because of how they take a look at those labor stats, these are more estimated. But just to give you an idea, right now, baby boomers are participating at slightly larger numbers than the other generations. Next slide. We promised to talk about what are the motivations of each generation. And I had mentioned that this is data-driven, so we've got a lot of info out there that tells us what is the heart of the matter for traditionalists. They are intent on leaving a legacy. They're very interested in what I call the S's: security, stability, and safety. So if you're putting together a program and you find that you have to make a lot of changes, these are the guys that might be saying, whoa, wait a second, didn't we say that this program was going to look like this? So we have to explain why we want to make changes. They are motivated by loyalty. They tend to be with the same organizations for a longer period of time. We know that both in who they volunteer with as well as who they worked with previously. They're motivated by God, duty, and country. So if there is a message that you want to impart about leaving a legacy, having a duty to help the world make the world better, this is the type of generation, or this is the generation, that would respond more effectively. They are also interested in education, and here's the deal. They recognized early on as they were growing up that it was the people who were educated that were really making the difference, and they pushed that message out to the next generations. So if you take a look at who has been more and more educated, Gen X right now has the highest education level, and we're not sure where it's going to be with Gen Y. However, it has been increasing, and it's fed by the traditionalist motivation. They're also motivated by being useful. I sat next to a gentleman who had recently retired from Caterpillar on a plane, and he said that he was the president of a nonprofit called the Institute for Learning After Retirement. And he was telling me, he said, I don't know why people think that we just want to go off into the sunset. We want to continue to be useful. His nonprofit, by the way, is growing leaps and bounds. They're trying to figure out how they're going to strategically grow. Traditionalists are motivated by pride. Pride in their work, pride in the things that they do. And because of how they grew up, they're also motivated by fear. I will tell you, however, I do not believe in our marketing messages to traditionalists that we should do what's called FUD marketing, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We should be going more from the abundant perspective because for them it's about leaving a legacy. Next. Baby boomers' motivations. Now, what I didn't put on this slide is, while the traditionalists are the S's, the baby boomers are the P's. They're motivated by power, prestige, and process. And some of that came from, as they were growing up, they didn't feel like they were getting what they needed from the traditionalist hierarchy, and they said to themselves, okay, we're going to make things our own. Certainly, and this is broad brush, so if you're a baby boomer and you're looking at these on the left-hand side going, hey, wait a second, this is the broad brush data coming through, motivated by money, status, toys, fear of failure, because the baby boomers want to be very successful. They are motivated by guilt because they take a look at their relationship, sort of scratch their head and go, this is not quite what I expected. They also are motivated by transformation. Baby boomers, as they have moved into everything that they have done, have attempted to transform the system. A really great word for use with baby boomers is transformation. Motivated by making a difference, very much by accomplishing things and being best in class. So there's a competitive thing that goes on with baby boomers. Right now in our workforce, in fact, 4 out of every 10 folks out there are baby boomers. And in order to have the results and be as accomplished, they put a lot of time and energy. And in fact, when you take a look at baby boomers, time is the unit of measure that they use to say that they have been successful. So think about that when you're messaging, how much time would be required for a big paid. They're also motivated by freedom, having choices, working in teams. Baby boomers are the kings and queens of teams. They recognized in order to make the impact that they were looking for, they needed to band together. They also influenced the educational system in such a way that a lot of those small group activities that we see for the Gen Ys were impacted because baby boomers said, we don't want you to be doing things alone. We want you to learn how to be good teammates. Think about team volunteering. They're motivated by respect, very much this. They like to have a process. They're not usually the freewheeling folks. They want to have, here are the steps that are needed. If you've got a successful program and you want me to participate, tell me what the steps are to create success. Next. So Gen X motivations. Here's something that's very interesting to note. Baby boomers aren't so hot at saying the words no, and Gen X are. Gen X knows more about boundaries, balancing work, home, and family, and they are very much interested in volunteering opportunities where they can be working with their children. They want to be excellent role models. They're very much interested in results. So these are the guys that, as you're messaging, want to know what is the result that we're expecting to get by our participation. They're also interested in efficiency. So they might take a look at a program and go, what's the easiest way to get from here to there? This, by the way, can be a little bit different than your baby boomers. Baby boomers are more interested in a relationship, and Gen X are more interested in efficiency. So you could see those two might have a problem. They get together. Yes, they're motivated by money, but not always for the reasons that we think. Theirs is about give back as well. Talking to several Gen Xers, they're like, yes, I want to make money so that I can offer it philanthropically, volunteer, or have the money set aside so I can do the volunteering that I want to do. They're also motivated by challenge. So they like the type of opportunities that they can really put their brains to. They're also looking for flexibility. So talking about the type of things that they would be interested in, they want options. Similar, in fact, to the options, the freedom that baby boomers want. They're very much interested in a healthy lifestyle. And don't be surprised when you're working with Gen X that they try to make things their own. Think about this. Gen X was the first generation of latchkey kids. So mom and dad went off to work and said, hey, Junior, get this done, and gave them the creative latitude to do that. So it may be in the programs or in however you're messaging it that you're speaking to the fact that they can help make things their own. It's a way to engage them in a very positive way. Next slide. Now let's talk about Gen Y's motivations. You know how I mentioned that baby boomers are motivated by relationships? Gen Y is as well. They're also looking for a variety of experiences. They, in essence, are building their own personal resume because they want to experience so much. The world is open to them. Because of the access to information on the Internet, they see a number of different ways that they can make a contribution. So variety is something that they're very much interested in experiencing. Small group activities where they can really build and make a difference are important. They're motivated by celebrity. They have watched a lot of the media, and they believe that they can make a big contribution. And when we're talking about any type of endorsement or that they might be intrigued by, if there is somebody who has volunteered in a particular area from a celebrity perspective, they're making that connection. They're motivated by feedback. They want to know how well they're doing. So don't be surprised if, however you put a program together or your messaging, that they will want some sort of communication feedback to you so that they can tell you how things are going and that they can make an impact on even making your program better. They're looking for mutual respect. This is something I love doing when I'm doing the workshops, is talking about Gen Y sees through race, religion, color, creed. They also see through the fact that we don't have hair, no hair, have dyed our hair. It doesn't matter. As long as the people that they are working with just bring it, then those things they see right through. And they're asking for mutual respect out there. One really great mentoring pair, by the way, are baby boomers and Gen Y, because they do and they are able to forge mutual respect. Gen Y can help on that technology divide as well. If we can create pairs where you've got a traditionalist who wants to learn how to do things technology-wise, and you've got your Gen Ys who want to make an impact and really respect the people around them, you can have a very cool volunteering pair. Gen Y is also motivated by happiness. One of the few generations that when they take a look at things, they go, how can I be happy in what I'm doing? Good word to be using. Yes, they are materialistic in some way, but they're also very cause-oriented, connecting in to cause and to competition in a way, because even though they're relationship-oriented and want to create community, they also have a little bit of that, how can we compete against another volunteer group? Very, very creative and looking to be using that creativity. So don't be surprised if you're asking, how can we do things better, if your Gen Ys won't come up with really great suggestions. They're motivated by the environment. In a moment, you're going to see an exercise I use. And one of the things that comes through is when I ask what motivates a Gen Y, I hear these words, taking care of Mother Earth. Yes, from an environmental perspective, but also talks about relationship and family. Motivated by money and having experiences. Next, Megan. So that's a lot of really interesting information. Again, all data-driven. Broad brush, I understand if you're sort of sitting there going, some of those really apply to me if I am that generation, and some others might not. Well, what can you actually do with that info? Next slide. I've been conducting workshops for the last 3.5 years to try to create understanding, because one of the things that I stand by is that we're not connecting in ways because we don't understand where each other's coming from. In fact, we're using some of the same language. We don't even get that we're speaking in tongues. So one of the things that you can do within your own volunteer corps or even within your own department to push home this point, you can do this powerful generational group exercise. What I do is I put the group into their generations. Take a look at those. If you're a baby boomer, if you're an X, if you're a Y traditionalist, go ahead and get in your groups. And then I ask them the first question, what do you think motivates the generations around you? Then we debrief. Personally, I will tell you, there's a little bit of slamming between generations when we have that, although I have found that Gen Y is the least likely to slam and the most likely to be self-deprecating because they have a pretty good understanding of what they're about. The second part of the exercise, then, is this. What really does motivate your generation? Using the information that people shared during the first round. People can claim it or not. Oh, guys, you got us nailed. Or, wow, you're all wet. Then asking the question, what are you most proud of about your generation? It can be a very powerful thing to hear traditionalists talking about creating the structure that really allowed us to get here. Baby boomers saying that they took on the establishment and made changes that they knew needed to be made. Your Generation X going, we really have taken technology to the next level. And your Gen Y saying, we're not waiting. We're making the impact that we want to make now. Then the third question, what do you wish the other generations truly appreciated about yours? There's some poignant responses that really open up the blinders as people understand what the other generations feel underappreciated about. For those of you who are interested in messaging, by the way, you will find that in this exercise there will be themes. There will be words that really resonate well. Feel free to use that in your messaging for your EVP. Next slide.
And Sherri, I just wanted to let you know that Tess is on the call and able to speak if you want to call on her or Carla as we go forward.
Great. Thank you. So before we talk about the similarities, let's go ahead and do that. Now, Tess, I know that you have this wonderful program, and you've been asked by Michelle Obama to do something special. Can you tell everyone a little bit about that program and how you're taking on the challenge?
Sure, yes. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry for the technical troubles earlier, but George Washington University got challenged this fall by First Lady Michelle Obama to complete 100,000 hours of community service, and in return, she has agreed to be our commencement speaker this spring if and when we finish. And so we're very much on track. It's been a huge mobilization of our entire campus community to collect those 100,000 hours, and we have a whole variety of different types of service programs that are putting forward hours toward that total. And actually, as you were just going over the characteristics of Generation Y, just about everyone rang true with what I'm seeing as having been successful and effective for our students. It's mostly undergraduate students and some graduate students, as well as faculty and staff, but the majority of the participants are undergraduate sheer Gen Yers. Mm-hmm. So some of the things that you talked about that really did resonate is first the association with celebrity. Michelle Obama has such star power, and people are definitely very excited that this challenge is so associated with her and that she's going to be associated with our university, that endorsement is a real motivator to people. Also, the group aspect and joining on with another group and participating in service projects together, especially in competition, is really inspiring people to get out there and do service. And one of the best examples we have of that is that our Greek community has been really highly involved, probably the most involved on campus of any type of student organizations. And the way that the Greek organizations work is that they do have a lot of competitive aspects, and they compete for Greek Excellence Awards that add a lot to the prestige of their Greek organization, and that really is something that matters to them on a school and a national level. That's important. And so this service piece has been tied in this year to the Greek Excellence Awards, and it is just giving them a real kick to get out there and do service, not just for service sake, but for the sake of the strength and development of their own Greek organization. And so whether it's Greeks or divisions within the staff, the faculty breakdowns, different departments are competing against each other, different residence halls, and so that sort of fun, competitive element of the service challenge we're definitely seeing is bringing out troops in high numbers.
Excellent. Thank you so much for talking about the things that you saw on that slide and really making them real for everyone who's listening. Carla, I know that in your program, it started with volunteering with baby boomers. And you had mentioned when we had talked about some of the older staff members be a little harder to convince. Based on the information you saw as we were going through things, did anything in particular resonate for you in the California State Library?
Yeah, one of the things, especially when you talked about baby boomers focusing on process and feeling the need for that, I think that also relates to their need for relationship building and being successful. And I think we're often surprised by Gen Xers who want to skip the process and move ahead. And so that's been something that's been a struggle for people, but I think they're beginning to see how they might be able to work through that.
That's great. That is definitely one of the friction points that we see, because if you've got one generation that's process-oriented, let's follow the steps, and you've got one that's really results-oriented, let's just get to the end result. I've seen, in fact, and this may resonate with some of you, that I've got baby boomers and X's in a room. My X's might be glazing over because they're lightning quick, they got it fast, and they're like, oh, do we have to sit here for all of this time? And a baby boomer's going, but wait, I want to hear what you have to say. That was fed, by the way, by baby boomers who got into programs and said, wait a minute, the hierarchy when I got in here, the traditionalists didn't really allow a lot of my voice to be heard. So I want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. And in a meeting, they'll have like a 2-hour meeting and they're going around, and the X's are just like, okay, enough already. Can't we just get to the result? So let's see, that might have resonated with some of you. I find that when I do that, when in person, I'm getting the eye rolls from some people who it really connected with. So don't be surprised that how the motivations of the generation can show up even in meetings. Let's talk about some of the similarities, because one of the things that I'm a huge proponent of, certainly there are differences, but this is all about leveraging. How do we leverage those differences, and how do we remember that we really have some things in common as well? Similarities, this is amazing. Okay, so this work was done 7 years ago. But what I find amazing is this is not rocket science. We receive great reward for the work we do, want to work with really good people, and believe that we're contributing. And we've accomplished something. Shocker. Next slide. We know from the research, other similarities, we all have a desire to learn, to be acknowledged, to be rewarded. It might take place in a little bit of a different way. The desire to learn for the baby boomers, they like a lot more interaction. You've got your X's that are much more technology-focused, that they like computer-based and blended learning. And your Gen Ys, they are looking for constant stimulation when it comes to learning. To be acknowledged. You're a traditionalist, they might say, hey, it's nice to be acknowledged, but it's really what I feel on the inside. Your baby boomers say, show how many hours that I've had in the program, and make sure that when you message to the rest of the organization that they have an understanding of the time commitment that I made in order to fulfill my volunteering commitment. Your X's, they want to be acknowledged, but they're a little ambiguous about it. They don't necessarily need the horns tooted, but they do want their peers to know that how smart they were in accomplishing what they did. And with your Gen Ys, they want to be acknowledged. They want to be acknowledged a lot. And this has a lot to do with how they grew up with sports. They were acknowledged for being there. The trophy generation, 11th place trophy versus just 1, 2, and 3, they were rewarded for participation, not necessarily for effort. And so they're looking for, hey, I'm participating. Make sure that you understand. So I know when I talk about some of this stuff, you might be going, man, some of this stuff doesn't sound really good. Just recognize that it has to do with how we were raised, how we grew up. This is not any type of judgment on what the generations are about. It just happens to be what is. Generation similarities, we also want to be trusted, valued, and respected. So if in your program that you can show that you trust, value, and respect, you are going to have it nailed. Here's the deal, though. Being trusted, being valued, and being respected looks different for each generation, which is why you need to know what that looks like so that you can truly put together messages in order to appeal to them to be in your program. I about 3 years ago, was doing a very contentious facilitation. And a woman looked at me afterwards and she said, you know, and Carla, this is interesting because it was a library district in the state of California. She looked at me and she said, all I wanted around here was to be trusted, valued, and respected. And boy, did we have an interesting discussion about what that looked like. And all generations want to succeed. Go ahead, Megan. Next slide. Okay, so what are my recommendations? Leverage the generations, the information that you've just learned here today. And don't lose sight of those similarities, because sometimes we get stuck in the differences, see it as a smoke screen, and allow it to stop us. Instead, just understand this is what is, and we can leverage that information to help ourselves. Use language the generations can really relate to as you market your EVP internally. That would be, if you did that exercise that I had mentioned, or just generally, some of the words that you saw on those slides are things that really resonate. Keep their motivations in mind as you create your processes and your program structure. One of the things I find is that organizations want to do like one size fits all. If we're going to do one size fits all, then let's make sure that we integrate a number of different adjectives that are going to appeal to people. You want to appeal to a Gen Y? Talk about things being dynamic. You want to appeal to a baby boomer and a traditionalist? Talk about legacy. You want to appeal to a baby boomer and a Y? Talk about relationship. You want to talk about we make a difference and here's what it looks like, here's the result? You're talking to an X. Next slide. One of the other things that you can do is reinforce what I call the student and teacher mindset, regardless of age. If we could only think about ourselves, not as the person that needs to instruct or only the person who receives, but regardless of how old we are, to have the mindset that I am both a learner and a teacher. So I can learn from the other generations, I can work with the other generations. Not I know more than that generation when it comes to technology, or I know more about how to be in relationship because I'm older. Instead, just understand that there's always ways for us to learn from each other. Really encourage respect of Megan goes, interesting, takes it to the next level. Tess goes, okay, I got it, takes it to the next level. The whole point is it's how to get to the really excellent result, whether it be in how you're marketing, how you're appealing. It's about enlargement. Notice I didn't in any way disrespect the idea of the person previously. We're enlarging the idea. And conduct a temperature check of your program. How is it really appealing to the people? How is it when you get feedback coming back in about how the program works that you are integrating that into your process? Next slide. So here were my official objectives for this morning. Defining the generational mix. Hopefully you can go back to that slide and go, okay, I get it. Traditionalists are 65 and older. Baby boomers are 46 to 64. 30 to 45, those are our Generation X. And underneath, we have our Gen Ys. By the way, sometimes I'm asked, what's the name of the next generation? Right now, we have absolutely no creativity. We have no creativity, because what I'm hearing out there is Gen Z. However, I know that ultimately we will come up with something that is more descriptive. Discuss the motivations of the 4 generations and the implications on your efforts. So the motivations, hopefully, from each one of those slides, you have a general idea. Again, I understand that this is broad brush, and that it's not really good, by the way, if you walk back into somebody that you know, figure out how old they are and go, I know how you think. No, this is a data point. And the implications on your efforts if you are trying to navigate the technology divide, market your messages more effectively, or get people to work better together. Just understanding if these are the motivations, then how about we look through that filter as we're taking a look at our efforts. And then share how you can engage across the generational divide. Again, and I may be ringing the bell a little hard on this, one of the things that I've found is that we have a lot of misunderstandings, and we just don't get that a generation could be coming from a different place. And to create understanding and make that connection, hopefully you can learn some interesting information today that will help. Now it's time for, you can go to the next slide, Megan. It's time for questions. I'm thinking that from your perspective, you may have some things that you would like to ask me, or Carla, or Tess, about the programs that they're running.
Thanks, Sherri. To the audience members, feel free to type in your questions in the right side panel, and we will read them aloud to Carla, Tess, and Sherri.
And I've got a question, Sherri, for you. This is Vicki with VolunteerMatch. I think just sort of looking through the attendee list and participants on the call, there's a couple of companies that are working to market their volunteer programs to their retirees.
Yes.
But then at the same time, they're obviously wanting to engage their current employees, which include, of course, all of the generations you've talked about, and in particular, Generation Y that's just entering and coming right out of college. So I'm curious if you have recommendations for how they should be thinking about incorporating kind of, what you've been talking about with the different ways that all these generations really hear the messages without, having to create 4 different types of emails or flyers or that sort of thing, sort of what you would do in their shoes.
Yes. So one of the things that I would do is use words that can resonate and have generationally defined meanings, like less hassle, it's going to be an easy program. That easy means different things to different generations, and hopefully the way you've created the program, it is easy, that it's going to solve some sort of problem because each generation is interested in problem solving. Each generation desires a sense of community, and however you message that has community coming out will resonate with each one of them. The other thing is just generally traditionalist or more rational versus emotional. And so when you're making the appeal for a traditionalist, you don't necessarily have to do more of the plucking of the heartstrings. They also believe in honor, and each one of the generations believes in honor. So if there's a way to, one of my favorite words, integrate the word honor in what you're doing, that will resonate amongst all. Also, each generation is looking for respect. So if there is a way, in however you're messaging, that you can use words like honor and respect, those go across all generations.
I have a question for Carla and Tess. I would love to hear, this is Megan, I would love to hear a little bit about which generation you target the most and maybe some obstacles you've seen in your work, kind of based on what we've heard from Sherri.
Well, this is Carla, and one of the biggest obstacles we've had is when we talk about baby boomers, because we began our program with sort of a focus on baby boomers, and as you all mentioned earlier, we've expanded beyond that as we begun to see the potential. But when we started talking about baby boomers, people in libraries said, "Oh, well, no problem. We're all set up for senior volunteers, so we're ready. Just get them here, and we know what to do with them." And this idea that somehow each generation will turn into the generation that's older than it when it reaches that age level is really hard to disabuse people of. I think this concept that once a baby boomer, always a baby boomer is what we need to be thinking about, and not that boomers are the retirees at this point. That just this sort of sense that people have of what's a senior volunteer and what's a youth volunteer, and that somehow as we all move through our lives together, we're going to move into those situations rather than keep living the generation that we're in.
And this is Tess over at George Washington University, and I would say that especially for our Gen Y students who are participating in this Michelle Obama Service Challenge, getting them to pay attention and sort of buy into the standards of our service challenge has been a little bit tricky. A lot of people are just disregarding the guidelines that we've repeatedly put out and want to believe that anything that they're doing that they're not getting paid for can count as service and should count as service. And we're using the VolunteerMatch system for all of our tracking, and it's been fantastic and very helpful. But we're definitely seeing a lot of people trying to put through hours that don't fit our criteria. So I think just getting everyone on the same page when they have their own ideas of what they think of as service has been tricky. And then with the other generations, because we have all of our staff and faculty who can also be involved, I think that getting people to engage with the technological side of it has been a challenge, because you do have to log in and track your hours. And a lot of people, as eager as they are to do the service and participate, that one last final step of activating your account, filling out your profile, and going in and putting in the information on the computer is a roadblock to some people, especially particularly older staff who might not feel comfortable using the technology and might not have the persistence to figure out how to do it, even if it is relatively simple. That seems to be something that is discouraging some from really putting their service all the way through.
So this is Sherri, and I'd really like to take on a number of things that Carla and Tess were just talking about. Carla, you had mentioned about how baby boomers don't become traditionalists. They are baby boomers who have those same motivations. That's one of the things that's really great about that exercise, because regardless of how old the baby boomer is, they still have those same type of motivations. It's important to understand that we can't pull out maturity as it relates to the generations. Certainly maturity is going to play a part. However, one of the things that we've seen in the data is those values that we grew up with stay with us. And so it is important to realize that if you've got something where you had traditionalist volunteers and all of a sudden you have baby boomers volunteering, they're not going to be volunteering in that same way. And you may think, yeah, we have a program, it's going to work. You're going to find yourselves modifying that program, because the values move along with the generation. And Tess, when you were talking about the guidelines not necessarily being met by the Gen Ys, one of the things that we see is we really need to connect the dots on why it's so important to follow the guidelines. Because Gen Y wants to know why, and because Gen Y hasn't always received the consequences of their actions. That, by the way, and as a baby boomer parent, I'll cop to this. We didn't necessarily have consequences as we were raising our children. And so they don't necessarily understand that if they don't do that the right way, then somehow it's going to impact. So there's a lot of really connecting the dots that needs to happen and explaining the why and why it's so important. As for the staff and the faculty, one-on-one assistance in making them feel more comfortable rather than just giving instructions, I've found in other organizations help. Now, I know people might say, oh, come on, it's so easy just to follow the instructions and, activate something. Well, think of it this way. Gen Y are digital natives, and the rest of us are digital immigrants. And the further you are from when technology was really embraced in your generation, the more difficult it is. It's like learning a new language. It's easier to learn a new language when you're younger than it is when you're older. So paving the way and really assisting older faculty who just, frankly, aren't that comfortable with technology. So just a couple of ideas that might help. Are there other questions, Megan?
There's one more. This is Vicki, and this one is for Carla around the libraries. And in particular, if you're seeing that boomers are using technology to engage in volunteering, so are they sort of coming through the website to sign up to volunteer, or are they continuing to come in through other methods? I know there's a good number of organizations and nonprofits on the call as well, so they may also be interested in sort of what you're seeing in your volunteer recruitment.
Yeah, we're seeing boomers come in through the website, but anecdotally what I'm hearing from libraries is that they're excited about what they're seeing is a bigger number of younger volunteers coming in, because that was a group that they were having trouble targeting. So yeah, I'll give you a little aside here. I'm a baby boomer working on my high school reunion, and we've set up a Facebook page for it and a website, and it's fascinating to watch how many are willing to come and join us there, and how many wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. So it's really, I think even, as you said earlier, even the differences within the generation is one that you have to deal with too.
Great. Sherri, are there any last comments or ideas you want to pose to the audience before we wrap it up?
I think it might be helpful if I just give you a few words for those of you, because I remember that there was a pretty decent percentage there on how to more effectively market and appeal to generations, that if you were trying to appeal to traditionalists, talk about how stable the program is, how effective it's been. Traditionalists are the earn-it generation. Sort of like when you go in and they're looking for, tell me about the experiences that you've had. They want to know what you have done to quote-unquote earn it. For your baby boomers, use words about choice, transformation, and time-saving, by the way. If there's something that you've integrated into your program that's time-saving, ding, 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 you're going to hear it from the baby boomers, because that's something that's so important to them. For your Gen X, I call them the don't pussyfoot around generation, because they're looking for direct communication and results. So think of words like results, challenge, flexibility. Make this volunteering opportunity your own. Also very, very much into the green movement. For your Gen Ys, emphasize cause, community, and creativity. Be inclusive, because they very much want to be part of something bigger. They are because of the relationships, they're also into friends. So if there's opportunities, as Tess mentioned, if there's the group activities, that's something that really resonates. Dynamic, stimulating, flexible, socially and environmentally conscious, those are the type of things that really appeal. And I know I said some of those words pretty fast. I think in the presentation itself, you've seen some of them, so hopefully that wasn't too difficult for you to come along with. And that's the information that I have. So unless there's additional questions, or Megan, there's something you'd like me to address, I think we're good.
No, that is great. Thank you so much, Sherri, and thank you, Carla and Tess, for joining us. To the audience, you can receive a PDF of the presentation from our website at the link that's on the screen right now, as well as a recording. And we also have the VolunteerMatch Client Summit coming up in April 29th in Las Vegas. So if anyone would like to learn more information about that, feel free to email us or contact us here at VolunteerMatch. Thank you, Sherri. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.